Hello, and welcome back to Consumer Times. Today, we're diving into a topic that many of you have requested about: unpacking the cost of education in India. In recent years, the rising cost of education in India has become a major concern for parents and guardians across the country. Before we talk further about the main subject, please like, share, give your valuable feedback, and do not forget to subscribe our channel to motivate us. Unpacking the cost of education in India. With a variety of schooling options, primarily government or public schools and private institutions, there's an undeniable gap in fee structures and associated expenses. Both types of schools may offer similar curriculums, predominantly based on the CBSE, Central Board of Secondary Education, pattern. However, the differences in textbook choices, uniform requirements, and stationery procurement methods can make private education feel out of reach for the average family. This issue isn't just about costs, it's about fairness, transparency, and the integrity of education as a service for all. Most schools in India, whether public or private, follow the CBSE curriculum, emphasizing standardized testing and structured learning approaches. Government schools, by and large, adhere to NCERT, National Council of Educational Research and Training, textbooks, which are not only standardized across the country but are also reasonably priced. This decision ensures that students from diverse socioeconomic backgrounds have access to the same quality of educational content, regardless of their financial situations. On the other hand, private schools often opt for proprietary textbooks published by private writers or publishing houses, arguing that these books provide value additions or a competitive edge. However, these alternative materials often come at a premium price, making them significantly more expensive than their NCERT counterparts. For families with children in private schools, this means a hefty annual expenditure on books alone. A common frustration among parents of children in private schools is the forced purchase of textbooks, notebooks, uniforms, and even stationery from the school's in-house stores. By monopolizing these essential supplies, schools ensure that parents have no choice but to buy from them, often at inflated prices. Simple items like notebooks or exercise books, which could be purchased elsewhere at a lower cost, are printed specifically for the school and sold exclusively through their store. This practice significantly increases the financial burden on parents, making education a costly endeavor. Furthermore, uniforms and stationery are also restricted to school stores. Uniforms often include proprietary designs or insignias that are difficult to source elsewhere, which only adds to the expense. This approach serves as an additional revenue stream for the school, turning basic educational resources into profit-making commodities. Private schools justify high fees and exclusive purchasing options by promising superior facilities, advanced resources, and a more rounded education. However, the essence of education as a noble profession aimed at enlightenment and empowerment seems lost in this process. The focus on revenue generation, whether through tuition, in-house stores, or additional fees for various activities, reflects a shift in the way private education is approached. For instance, some schools charge separate fees for technology-based learning aids, activity fees, sports facilities, and even fees for events and celebrations. While additional resources and activities can enrich students' learning experiences, they also place a greater financial burden on families, especially when charged on top of already high tuition fees. These practices underscore the commercialization of education, with each facility and amenity carrying a price tag. The lack of standardized regulations governing private school fees and the cost of associated materials is a key factor in this disparity. Although the Right to Education (RTE) Act ensures free and compulsory education for children aged 6 to 14, there are no comprehensive rules enforcing fee structures or preventing price gouging in private institutions. As a result, many private schools operate autonomously, setting their own fees, selecting their own materials, and even deciding on various charges for extracurricular and co-curricular activities. The absence of strong oversight from educational authorities has led to a situation where private schools can operate almost unchecked. While government institutions follow guidelines on textbook and uniform costs, private schools exploit loopholes, charging premium prices for basic necessities. This financial strain, in turn, limits access to quality education for many families, counteracting efforts to make education more inclusive. The responsibility of regulating school fees and ensuring fair practices lies with both central and state education departments. However, despite the growing financial burden on families, regulatory bodies seem largely inactive in addressing these issues. A lack of stringent guidelines, regular audits, and penalties for schools violating fair pricing principles allows this profit-driven approach to education to continue. Parents often voice complaints, but in many cases, their concerns go unheard. Without intervention from educational authorities, the disparity between public and private schooling costs only continues to widen, and parents are left with little recourse. For education to be accessible to all, it is essential that authorities enforce guidelines that prioritize fairness over profit. Historically, education has been regarded as one of the most respected and noble professions. Teachers, educators, and institutions were viewed as guiding lights, imparting knowledge to empower young minds. Today, however, education's commercialization, particularly in the private sector, has overshadowed its core purpose. Running a school has transformed from a mission of imparting knowledge into a business enterprise, with students and their families as the paying customers. To restore education to its noble roots, there needs to be a shift in mindset among private educational institutions. Fair fee structures, the use of affordable textbooks, and optional purchasing policies could reduce the financial strain on parents. Transparency in fee allocations, as well as accountability for additional costs, would bring education closer to its original purpose, providing equal learning opportunities for all. The path to resolving these issues is complex, but there are steps that can be taken. Parents, educators, and policymakers need to work collaboratively to address and reform these practices. Key measures might include: schools should be required to disclose a breakdown of fees and justify additional costs. Transparency can encourage fair pricing practices. Just as public schools use standardized NCERT textbooks, private schools should be encouraged to adopt affordable textbook options. Guidelines limiting the profit margin on in-house materials could also help. Education authorities must enforce fair pricing rules, conduct regular audits, and establish penalties for schools found violating these standards. Parents must stay informed about their rights and options and advocate for reasonable fees and transparent policies within schools. This can be done through parent associations or even online forums dedicated to these issues. Education should be a force for good, empowering young minds and helping them reach their full potential. However, the escalating costs associated with private schooling, combined with mandatory purchases and unchecked fees, make it increasingly difficult for many families to access quality education. If we want to see education as a noble profession once again, stakeholders at every level, schools, parents, and regulators, must come together to address these disparities. The time has come for education authorities to step in and enforce regulations that protect the interests of families and restore balance to the system. By fostering transparency, fairness, and accountability, we can work towards a future where quality education is accessible to all, regardless of financial means. Thanks a lot for being with us. That's all for today's concern, the growing fee disparity and commercialization of education. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay updated with Consumer Times.